MTV is a whole, there's this thing they say, if you're going to work at a job, name your price. And I always ask, well, why we got to name our price? So you can know how much you can deal with for that price. Name it.
Welcome to the Cultivating Truth podcast, where faith and culture collide. My name is Aaron Davis, and I will be your host. And I'm so excited to introduce our next guest for you. But first, I have to ask you a question. What if I told you that you do not have to go to film school in order to be a good filmmaker? If you listen to someone like Quentin Tarantino, he would say the only film school that you need is just to pick up a camera and start shooting. This is common in artistic professions. Most of the time, at the end of the day, people really just want to know, are you really good at what you do? Well, today we get to hear from a story about a man who was called. He was called by God to tell stories and to go into the film world. And that led him on a path for education, a secular education, training and equipping him in ways that could go far beyond his own imagination. He had no clue what the Lord had in store for him. This would lead him down a path of working within secular media, working for an organization that most would do anything to be a part of, having the opportunity to work for MTV. He has continued on his education and he wants to continue learning more about how to be what God has called him to be. And that starts with his mind and his heart, and most importantly, his soul. Our next guest is William Wonders III. William grew up in Brooklyn, New York. He secretly began writing and shooting video during his time in college in the late 90s. It all came to a head in 2009 when William decided to enroll at New York Film Academy in Manhattan, New York. He did this after starting an after-school program to teach film and video. William has a documentary picked up by Amazon Prime called Fixing Grandma, and is currently in production on a documentary about the health of Black men in America. William owns his own production company, Quiverful Productions, LLC, making movies and inspiring everyone that sees them. All right, William, man, it's good to see you. How's it going? How are you?
It's going good. Finally together.
Yes, we've been trying to make this happen for quite some time, man.
Yeah, but it's worth the wait.
What have you been doing these days? I know you've been traveling a lot, working on many projects.
We just finished. I was cam on a new CBN Films movie that just came out called Investigating the Supernatural. So that just came out. So that's going all over now. So we're just doing advertising for that. I was working on that. I was a camera up on that. I've been traveling to Texas, New York, just kind of all over America, shooting stories for CBN. I have my own projects that I'm working on. And there's actually one special project that I'm working on for my thesis because I'm still in school. So I'm working on that. Then I'm working on other people's projects as a DP and cam up. So that's what I got going on. And then I'm editing. So,
well, man, I know that you put out some good work and you are so skilled, whether it's cam ops, editing, directing. I know you're writing and producing these days as well. So obviously your craft is fantastic. But one of the main reasons I wanted to hop on here was not for you to say, here's a how to, edit this way or, use DaVinci, but more I want to hear about your story. I think that your story is fascinating and one worth telling. So, man, where did all this begin for you?
Well, for me, it began with my mom. Okay, my mom was in charge of the drama guild in church, and I was a little kid. She had all these plays, and I knew everybody's line. I could recite everybody's line, and so my love for the media art started there. And I always knew at a young age I was either going to be a filmmaker or a preacher. Some of my friends said, "Well, isn't that the same thing, actor or a preacher?" I was like, "No, it's not the same thing." But it started there. And then I went to school to get my regular degree, and then I went to get my Master's of Divinity. And I was under the assumption that I was going to be, teaching in the church, doing youth pastor stuff, things like that. And God had another idea. And he said to me that I'm going to give you your dream. And it took at least 10 years for me to get to that point where I finally went to film school, New York Film Academy. And when I stepped in there, because I was always doing media work, when I stepped in the class, the first class, my knowledge of filmmaking went from 10 to 75 in one class. And I was like, it's like the whole world opened up. And then I was hooked from then on. Went to New York Film Academy, was still working. I started a production class for at-risk youth in my school that I was working at. I was working as a dean. And the kids are getting in trouble and they say, hey, Mr. Wonders, we need some help. Like we keep getting in trouble after school. Can you help us? Did that. And we ended up winning a bunch of awards, even at some of prestigious New York awards, and like Tribeca Film Festival. And then it was at that moment when we were watching our movie win, the screen, the lights are on the audience, and I'm looking. And it was at that point I knew I want to do this for the rest of my life. And a door opened up for me to go to MTV. I worked at MTV as an assistant editor. And then after that, 8 years, I traveled to Virginia Beach to further my education and to work at Christian Broadcasting Network.
And that's where we find you now.
Yes.
So you've had quite the journey, and you've kind of been all over the place with ministry, education, working with MTV, and now CBN. Man, what was that like? What was that like when you were working at MTV?
It was rough in the beginning because you got to work your way up. And this is probably the reason why I want to teach so much, is because I think work ethic, if you don't have it, you have to learn it. And the only reason why I was able to become the assistant editor, because when I first started working there, I was a transcriber for the Teen Mom franchise. So that's the show I worked on for 8 years. And you had to transcribe all the footage that came in. And I would ask the lead assistant editor every day, hey, can I work? Can you teach me? Can you, and he'd be like, no, I can't do it. It's so busy. And then a year later, there was an opportunity for another show opening up, and he said, hey, do you want to do this? I was like, absolutely. Meet all types of people, right? In New York, in the industry, you meet all types of different people, different lifestyles. And it was at that time I knew that I had to make a decision about, what I believed in my heart, just even as a Christian, but also as a person who worked hard. Because it didn't matter who somebody, I couldn't carry that attitude of, oh, this person is that, this person is that. I had to be a person that said, this is my light. I'm going to let it shine, but I'm also going to have a work ethic that says, hey, now the light can shine even further, because I wasn't lazy, because I wasn't just expecting things to happen for me. I had to have that drive that says, this is where I want to go. This is where I want to be. This is what I need to learn. And I had to push for every inch. I met people that were, different lifestyles, but also people that didn't like Christians very much, the other side. And they had to get to a point where they had to respect me, and it wasn't crazy. I didn't go, the Lord's going to get you. And, that's not winning anything. Mm-hmm. It was more for them. It was more about my action. And a lot of the things that I did there at MTV spawned out of my heart for God, spawned out of what he was doing in me, the way I treated people, the way I talked to them, the way I acted, what I allowed. A lot of that came from that. And they knew, especially at a certain point, that they could depend on me, whether they liked me or not.
Did you ever feel burdened working at a place like MTV?
Only with certain people. Like MTV as a whole, there's this thing they say, well, if you're going to work at a job, name your price. And I always ask, well, why we gotta name our price? So you can know how much you can deal with for that price. Name it. And it would be certain individuals there, not as a whole. It would just be certain individuals that would give you a hard time. And they were either into themselves so much, or they wanted to make it hard for you because that's how they were brought up. That's how they felt like they had to do it. And I would often hear them say, well, this is how they taught me. And I was like, well, everybody's not like that. So dealing with all of that, I knew a long time ago, even there, that I could handle a lot more. My temperament was better than most people in that situation. And I think that's the reason why God had me there in the first place, was that he knew I could take the stress of certain people and be able to learn and still and grow, but also be a reflection of him.
I love that. How much of your education in New York at the academy, how much credit do you give to that on setting you up for the success that you would eventually have with MTV and eventually CBN?
I'll say it like this. New York Film Academy turned me into a filmmaker. Okay. Going to CBN and Regent University, my teachers there turned me into a technician.
Okay.
So my love for film and storytelling and cinematics and movies spawned from my education at New York Film Academy and meeting teachers that were passionate about their stuff. There was never not a moment where my teachers weren't passionate about what they were teaching us. So that spawned from my love was even just emphasized, like a battery pack was just put in my back about film and cinematics. But when I got to Regent, it was like, okay, yes, you have a love. But how do we tap into that and get what we want on screen? And I think that's always the biggest issue with filmmakers and creating stories as artists. How do we get what's in our head onto the screen? And Regent University and the professors there helped me connect the dots. I already knew how to do a lot of stuff, even being at MTV, and I learned there as well. I learned immense things there. But when I got here, it connected the dots of everything. What I knew, how I knew it, the way I knew it, and being able to create projects that connected all of that education that I had received in New York.
Did you ever feel that between your locations at MTV and the Academy in New York, some pretty secular environments, did you ever feel that your faith was either being maybe tested or, with temptation to fall? Did you ever feel that tension, essentially, is what I'm getting to?
I never felt the temptation, but you could definitely, if you're not grounded in God, there's a certain way to be grounded in God. If you're not grounded in God, then you can let things go to your head. A lot of people said to me, "Oh, you worked at MTV and blah, blah." If I let that go to my head, I wouldn't have learned as much as I did. And I think even as Christian filmmakers, non-Christian filmmakers, we got to be careful about this pride, because when you get tapped into pride, I'm this, I'm that, I want to be the director, I want to be all these other things, and you kind of cut yourself off from the source. I always tell people that I don't want my ideas. I have some great ideas. I don't want my ideas. I want God ideas, and that's something that I push to everyone. The pride issue is a big thing. It just cuts you off so much. I know being there, I had an opportunity to be like, when I started working, I used to work overnight, but I moved to the daytime. Then people talk to me. Certain people talk to me because, I was working in the daytime. I wasn't at the nighttime, and it's silly because we're all a team, but that's just people creating hierarchy for control. And if you don't notice that, you can get caught up in that. There was also definitely some issues where people, served some other gods, that were, and I'm not talking about like other religious things. I'm talking about like, the enemy, like literally saying it and saying that and having that sign over their wall, But in the midst of all of that, when I saw that, God said, "Hey, you're okay. You're protected." So it was definitely something I had to check in with myself every day. I had to check in with myself and say, "Hey, Will, all right, now you're getting too comfortable. Hey, Will, you're allowing this things," because people know when you're serving God, and they'll try to see how far they can get with you. So I've had some offers from people, not MTV, but people that worked around there, offers for certain things, and I had to remember who I was often.
Wow. What's been your biggest hurdle on your journey thus far?
Watching people and companies not fulfill their potential. And I think that's the first lesson I had to learn, was that everybody's not going to fulfill their potential. Everybody's not going to use what God has given them or have that attitude to do that. And that's been the hardest for me, because you talk with some people, you see some people, they got the gift, they got the abilities, or certain companies have the, to do great things. And they just decide to say, you know what? We're going to keep things the old way. We're going to do things, that's probably been the biggest thing for me, because I think about it. What would Jesus do if he had what we had? The technology, like, just think about it, how creative could he be? I mean, I can just see Jesus creating a canvas in front of a camera. You know what I mean? And then telling a story like only he could. And I think that he's given us that. He's given us that mantle to do that. And I think a lot of times, even in Christian companies and other regular companies, we have to be careful about putting a box on what God can do through us. So, and that's why I'm glad at CBN, because now we can tell stories, we can be creative.
So feeling as if people are not hitting their potential in the sense that they're limiting God and what he can do for them, for their stories, for their work. Is that what you're tapping into?
And even like the gifts that God has given people. There's such a high percentage of people who God has gifted that are not tapping into it. They're not tapping into what God, they're afraid it's safe. I'm safe here. I don't have to worry about taking a risk. I don't worry about stepping out on the ledge. I don't have to worry about doing, all these things. That's why that's why when people do things, and even if they fail or the movie's not as good, whatever, it takes a big step to step out and create stories, create screen stories, create movies. That takes a big step. And there's a high percentage of people who have the gifts and talents to do some of the things that you and I are doing, but they're afraid to, or the enemies lie to them, or they say, I just want to be comfortable because I saw this person fail. I saw this, this happen. There's such a high percentage of that. And I would love to encourage people just to stop hiding, because the world needs you in your gift working.
So hearing your story and knowing you come from one of the biggest networks that's ever been out there, they've definitely shifted in their focus over the years, MTV. Yeah. But you go from MTV, as you said, working on Teen Mom, now known for nonstop replays of ridiculousness. Shows such as Jackass in the past. Never mind the music television part of it.
Right.
But you go from MTV, home of the real world, to now CBN.
Yes.
Let's dissect that contrast.
It is a contrast, but you know what? Even with that contrast, there's something that I find is that I feel needs to be consistent. And this is going to be touching on some other stuff, but when it comes to Christian filmmaking, one thing that will never be defeated, one thing that will never be, people will never say no to, is quality. Mm-hmm. Whether it's at MTV, whether it's at CBN, quality will always carry over, and in the contrast, at MTV, it might have been the environment could have been more rough, slightly toxic, but you learn, but here when I'm at CBN, the people are more loving, more forgiving. I've met some amazing people, that are working in their gifts, that are not afraid to be unapologetic. So it's interesting to see the contrast of people are working in their talent and gift at MTV, and so are there people at CBN. But also, I find that the motivations are different. The motivation.
Explain.
We got to work. We got to pay bills for the job. Even though they want to create stories, some of the producers there, they love creating stories at MTV. But also, it's a job. There's no love for the work. It's, hey, we got it done. This is good. All right, on to the next. And then they're over at CBN. It's like, okay, well, how do we get to the heart of the story? How do we affect and make change? I can say that most of all of the producers that I've met at CBN have that understanding and have that drive to create stories that touch people's hearts, and it's such a different, even the atmosphere is different. You're working with people. People have personalities. You're going to bump heads with people, but it's the fact that you can actually have some forgiveness over here at CBN, and talk about things. And, that's actually a viable option where it's a machine. What's the work's got to get done no matter how you feel.
I want to tap into something that you said, because I think we don't talk about it enough. Mm-hmm. And conversations will come up even with AI nowadays, and its rise in popularity of usage within especially film. But you mentioned, the passion or the drive or our why. What's our why? And any business, if they're successful, they should have a mission statement, their why. Right? Like it's essential. You don't just sell shoes, you don't just, sell, shirts or whatnot, or make films. You should have a why. You think of companies like Chick-fil-A, their why is so essential on being a blessing to other people. It's skyrocketed them at the top of the fast food chain.
Yeah.
And I want to talk about the soul of a project. Oftentimes we want to talk about a soul with us as individuals. Now, obviously, if you don't believe in the spiritual, then you might not believe in a soul, and you might look at human beings as complex machines. And I'm not here to go into that argument, but we believe as believers that we have a soul, and the soul is the most essential part of our being. It's who we are. It's our essence. Greek philosophers would go into this and saying the form of a man, what is your essence? And I don't think that this gets talked about in our artwork enough, but I'll sometimes see an AI generated video, and before I even know it's AI, I look at it and I go, I just feel like this is soulless. I really felt this whenever I saw Secret Invasion from the Marvel Studios, the Nick Fury story, and I had no clue. I had no clue that the opening credits were all AI, and I just kept telling my wife, I was like, man, I don't know, I'm not really a fan. It just seems like it's without a soul. Let's dive into that. What is it like to have a soul on a project? And I'm not necessarily talking about our spiritual soul that our Lord Christ Jesus, he came from his throne to die for our sins, to redeem us, and to ultimately restore us to the Father. What is it like thinking through the soul of a project and the essence of a why, and what is this project?
I think we start getting in trouble when we start imitating, especially in Christian filmmaking. I've had a couple of friends that I've talked to about this that are not saved. They talk about Christian movies and how to them it's all the same thing. It's all the same, all cookie cutter. Now there's been some movies coming out like The Forge and all of them that are kind of, breaking that. Dallas, is doing some great things. So
yeah, with The Chosen. Yeah.
With The Chosen. And we're seeing these spots of soul, the soul in projects. We're seeing these spots of it. And this is me, my struggle. My thing is it shouldn't be spots. It should be everywhere. There's too many stories that need to be told. There's too many stories that can be told that connect us, that we can see perspective from somebody who may not have been in Christ, but now is in Christ, or somebody who's not in Christ, but they're journeying, or, children growing up realizing, hey, what is it about God? And then even some people who question God. What are those stories? What is, stories about? And this is why it comes back to the God idea, because I feel like God gives us these ideas, gives us these things to connect with others, to connect with each other, to connect with the world. And I think that we've gotten caught up sometimes with making Christian films for Christians instead of just making Christian films or films with a Christian base. I think we're missing out on these stories. For me, the soul of the project, it's It's that connecting, it's that hook, it's that first idea. Why am I why am I writing this? Why am I shooting this? It's because I had this idea, and now let's build upon that. Why is this idea good? What is connected to this idea? What is God trying to say through this connection, through this idea? And you can even see it. Like with I've heard people complain about AI, right? And I think AI can be used as a tool. It shouldn't be the end all be all. It should just be used as a tool, but it's only imitating what's already been done, So people say, oh, AI is this. I say, yeah, but it'll always imitate. And so the question is, are we starting to do what AI is doing and just imitate other projects and other stuff instead of creating something with soul and art and painting? Don't complain about AI. Be the change. Do something that AI is gonna have to copy, have to obey because your stuff looks so different, and yeah, that's where I sit with it. Sorry, I hope my answer wasn't too long.
Man, spitting gold. I love that, and I think that that's so encouraging. And yeah, I mean, we can definitely use AI as a tool and as a resource. I think some of the problem comes into when people use it as completely replacing people on the projects, and they can't replace people. We have something, as you mentioned, through our creativity, our imagination, our wonder. I've talked to some amazing people lately about how we have to spark Christians to continue to wonder. It's a beautiful, and that's what allows us to dive into science, art, creativity, imagination, stories. And it's the wonder of, I can't fully grasp this God that I know is there, but I only see a glimpse because I'm so small and he's so big. It's not because he's not there. It's because I'm just so small. I only see his feet, I only see his toes. He's so much bigger. I'm an ant. And I think that's beautiful. So well said, brother. If I want to be like you, man, if I want to imitate you, okay? Now, not in the sense of being William Wonders the Fourth, but if I'm inspired by what you're saying and your education and your heart for education, your craftsmanship, and if I'm wanting to get into film, what do I do? Do I just pick up a camera, go? Do I get a crash course online? Do I go to school? What do I do, man?
Don't tell me you're a filmmaker. Show me. A lot of people talk. A lot of people are critics. But a lot of people talk about people or movies. Oh, this is trash, bro. Those other things. Try making one. And then tell me what that's like. If you take that attitude about showing instead of talking, you'll begin to grow. Because there's no time for talking when you're doing. You want to be a filmmaker. You have a wealth of knowledge in any of these places, platforms you can go to. So much. But all that knowledge means nothing if you do not apply it, if you don't take an approach to it that says, hey, I'm going to get better. I want to learn more. It's never about, and I know, yes, it's nice. I would love to win an Oscar and all this stuff. That's nice. But I got to a point where it's not about winning the contest. It's about exposure. I may not, and I think a lot of filmmakers get thwarted off because they didn't win the contest. And it's not about exposure because there's somebody at those festivals, somebody at those place schools that see and say, hey, I really liked your thing. I really noticed that. Take it. It's your approach and your attitude to not getting your way. If you're trying to shoot something, a scene, and it's not going well, you don't just say, well, here we go. That's as good as it gets. No, you have to find a way to get that scene done. You've got to find a way to work through with your actors. All of that is in your character. So if you want to become a filmmaker and work on your craft and work on your character. Because there's a lot of people that I've met, the directors, they're horrible. They've met some horrible directors, man. And they're horrible Either they're horrible because their character is jacked up, or they're horrible because they don't know as much as they let on. They got in there, right? They got the hookup. But people always recognize work ethic. They recognize character. And people who are making movies on sets and those other things, they want people who have character and who are learning and learning and want to get better, not just sitting there and saying, hey, well, Aaron, if we use false color at this temperature, then, now you're just talking, where's the doing? So that's my approach. Work on your approach to yourself and to others, to your craft and to your character.
I love that, man. Kind of the final question I have for you is, it kind of has to deal with this theme that continues to come up about education. You started off and you talked about how you went from 10 to 75 and then even now you've had a great successful career, but you're continuing on in your education. What are you aspiring to do with all this education?
I want to be able to walk in a room without a camera or anything and know how to bring what's in my head to the screen. I want to be able to walk in and say, I want the light here. I want the light here. And then if I can't figure it out, I can always say, let's put the camera up and let's see what we get. A lot of, some people would be like, hey, you want this, you want this. I say, and sometimes I tell them, I won't know until the camera's up. So I want to be able to see a space, see what maybe the director wants or see what the company wants and be able to deliver that easier and easier as much as possible, even if it's hard, but being able to figure it out. That's always my goal, to problem solve in cinema and to create stories that touch people. I want to be so good at what I do that and this is why I don't care about the accolades, because accolades fade. Dust gets on those. Accolades are nice, they'll open some doors for you, but if I stop growing and stop learning to be better, then I put myself in a situation where I become like everybody else, and I want to be me. So that's my aspiration. I want to be the best that I can be as a filmmaker, director, and essentially, and here's the key part, right? For my stuff, absolutely. But I want to be able and so good in what I'm doing that I'm helping others bring their dreams to fruition. I love it, man. There's nothing like somebody giving you their script, giving you the movie and say, hey, I need help, or their documentary, hey, can you help me with this feature? Hey, I love to help others achieve their dreams. It is my favorite thing to do something and watch you flourish. And I think a lot of times we've gotten it backwards. This is about me, or we won't share ideas, we won't do these things because it's about me. But when you can work with somebody and say, hey, I'm glad you got your accolade, I'm glad you got your award, I'm glad you realized your dream. That right there, that's at the core of me.
There's a lot of humility in your tone and in your story, especially with film. You don't have to have a degree in this medium. There's many successful creatives that are out there who they just picked up a camera and they just grew from there. Some, it was networking. They knew certain people and that just continued to open doors. And then you hear others who they pursued education before they ever did anything. Your story is unique in the sense, started with a calling and an understanding of what the Lord had in place for you. You were obedient to that calling. And so you got educated, you got groomed, and you learned how to be the best of your worldly ability. But then you had a successful career. You had a career and you had great things going and you could have continued from there. But the humility part and the story that I find fascinating is how you're continuing to groom and you're continuing to learn. And you see it, I see it with what we do with our ministry. Is it's so easy to be a hothead. You're gifted, and you are. That's the thing, is these people really are gifted.
Yeah,
you're gifted. I'm gifted, right? But that doesn't mean anything. And learning, being mentored, always having a humble spirit. You know, Bible says that the Lord opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. That grace that he gives to the humble is so much better than anything that our proud spirits could whip up. And brother, I appreciate your story and how you inspire myself, no matter at what point in life, no matter what accomplishments that you have, your age, anything like that, that we're always here to learn. And for what you said, because it's not about us, but can we serve the next person? Can we open a door for them? Can we allow them to attain their God-given ability? Brother, I just appreciate that. And I know that people are going to want to keep up with you. And so what's next? How can we keep up? How can we stay in tune and keep an eye on everything that you have in the future?
I am currently, I have my YouTube channel, which is Quiverful Productions LLC on YouTube. I also have an Instagram, WWonders3, where I put a lot of my content in. And then I'm on TikTok as well, WWondersIII. But the YouTube thing is where I'm really leaning into. I'm doing tutorials for people who are beginning in film. So in film and podcasts, everything, like just in media in general. I do tutorials now. I'm in my second season. I'm actually posting tonight.
Okay.
So I'm doing that's what I'm going to be leaning into, those platforms.
Always giving back. Brother, I appreciate you, and I pray that your work would continue to glorify Christ and that you continue to lead people well.
Thank you so much, man. Aaron, I appreciate what you're doing, man. Like, this is what you're doing is very essential. You know what I'm saying? Like these kind of conversations, they are what break the enemy's plans for people that want to go out and do more, but they don't see people like them, or they don't see people that, that can say, hey, maybe I can do that. And so I thank God for you. Pray that God continues to uplift you and strengthen you and your family as you continue to grow your platform exponentially.
Well, thank you, brother. Well, we're in this together, and so I'm looking forward to continue to hopefully collaborate moving forward in the future. And I think the Lord has big plans.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Well, thank you, William. We appreciate you being a guest on the show, and you are more than welcome to join us any other time.
Oh, thank you so much, man.
So there you have it. I want to thank my brother, William Wonders III, for joining us for the Cultivating Truth podcast. I specifically wanted William to jump on here, tell his story. I interact with individuals all the time, young, aspiring filmmakers who they say, well, I might not necessarily be called to do something that's Christian. I might be called to the wild. And you hear stories such as Williams, who worked with MTV, had a great career with MTV, but humbled his spirit and is always learning. And the Lord has continued to blossom and grow and educate him, and has a much bigger dream and plan than he could ever imagine. And I want to just stop, take a pause, and imagine you have a dream. You have something that you believe that God is calling you to. Use your imagination and wonder with us. What if he could do even more than what you can imagine? And the answer is, he can't. You might have your goals, aspirations, and plans. You might have a big dream of working on a film set, whether it's with Marvel Studios, Disney, Warner Brothers, Sony. But he might have an even bigger plan for you. So keep that in mind. Have a humble spirit. Allow his good, gracious, loving hand to pick you up. He opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. Thank you, brother. Aletheia Legacy has devoted its mission to discipling creatives and educating them. We are growing the kingdom of God by spreading the arts. If you'd like to support our ministry, then I'd encourage you to go to aletheialegacy.com/support. Donating allows us the finances to build up our resources as we wish to continue equipping the church and its creatives to create beauty, engage culture, and inspire the world. And that means telling stories like William's and hopefully handing it off to the next generation so that they can learn from people like him and myself and do even better and more beautiful things for the glory of God. Blessings.